decorating a Christmas tree considered witchcraft? If so, can you give some scriptures that explains it? Well, it's not technically witchcraft, but let's talk about some Christmas trees. Y'all ready? This is where it's going to get a little spicy. Go to Jeremiah chapter 10. Now, as you're turning to Jeremiah chapter 10, allow me to qualify what I feel to be somewhat of a theme or tone that I know that tonight will take on. I would say conservatively, 80 to 85% of the traditions and the expressions of what you and I know in this Western world of the Christmas experience are not just founded not in Scripture, but most of them are taken and derived directly from pagan heathen worship. Every single one of them. In fact, before we get to Jeremiah chapter 10, let me challenge you. Go home tonight and subsequent days, read the New Testament, read the book of Acts, read the letters of the Apostle Paul, read 1st, 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, Jude, Revelation, read it all. And I want to challenge you outside the Gospels to find any clear communication about any type of celebration or honoring the birth of Jesus Christ. It was not something that was prevalent in the early church. We worship on Sunday because it's Resurrection Day. We celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. There was little acknowledgement to the birth of Jesus. It did not matriculate into what we know as a quote-unquote Christmas celebration till approximately the 4th century, when what we know as the Roman Empire declared Christianity the official religion. And here's what Constantine, his mother Helena, and a group of other folks did. They took all the pagan traditions and they Christianized them. That's what they did. That's why we celebrate Christmas on December 25th, because of the solstice and the pagan gods, et cetera, et cetera. So most of the dates, most of the traditions, most of the things that we know as Christmas originally were not celebrated by the early church. They were pagan in nature, and we just, quote, Christianized them. Now, the question asks if it's witchcraft. Technically, not witchcraft. I'm going to qualify the tree in a moment, but go to chapter 10, the book of Jeremiah. It says, "Hear the word of the Lord. It speaks unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen. Be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain. For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of his hands, the workman with his axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it does not move." Now, I don't know how you read that, but that sounds like what most of us have in our house right now. Now, it says the heathen over and over and over. As you go through the book of Jeremiah, particularly when we get into chapter 22, 24, 44, etc., we discover that really when he speaks of the heathen, he's speaking of what we know as Baal worship, specifically Ashtaroth worship. This was a custom in early paganism of the days to take nature. By the way, paganism is really a worship of nature. Is to take nature, remove it, place it into your home, and to celebrate it, to decorate it, and to sing songs around it. Sounds a whole lot like what most of our Christmas expressions are. So, allow me to give us a beginning illustration to set the tone of the night. I want you to imagine a brick. It's a common illustration. A brick can be used to build a home for somebody who is homeless, but it can also be used to be thrown through a window to disparage somebody as well. The brick is not the problem, it's what you do with the brick, okay? So when we talk about a quote-unquote Christmas tree, I know that most of us here probably have one in our home or in some respect our office, whatever it may be. And if I could guess, most of them, you're not singing songs to pagan deities around them. Now, I can tell you what the Myers house has done throughout years in light of Jeremiah chapter 10. We do have a tree. Half of our ornaments are Lottie Moon and the IMB and Missions. But on the top of our tree, some of you have seen this, we actually have a crown of thorns on the top of our Christmas tree. And so what we have done is tried to emphasize in a tradition that's roots are not necessarily holy and righteous and godly, is yet we can take that. By the way, this is kind of where Genesis chapter 50 comes into play. Remember what it says, that what you meant for evil, God meant for good? And so again, to quote Christianize something is not a necessarily bad thing. And I think one of the struggles that we face today is if we discover that anything that we do had any kind of origin in any kind of pagan or secular, we tend to just discard it, throw it out, and say, no, if that were the case, we would celebrate nothing. Because you understand the early church, the early Christians, we were the marginalized culture. We had control and authority over nothing. And so at some level, there has to be some type of celebration, honor, and recognition. What we know is the modern Christian tradition really began to surface in the early 1800s. After what we know as the Protestant Reformation got going after about 250 years, they began to, quote, re-Christianize the pagan traditions, if that makes sense. So the tree in Jeremiah chapter 10 is not necessarily a good thing because it was a heathen tree for the purpose of worshiping the, quote, pagan gods of the day. This is between you and the good Lord, but in our home, at least our tree, has a very Jesus focus, and not just a birth focus, but a death and resurrection focus. That's our tree. Any tree follow-ups, concerns, issues, thoughts? Oh, we got a few in here. So here's our Jeremiah 10 pagan trees right here. But again, there's nothing pagan about them. Thanks for being a part of today's daily question. Now, we answer a question each and every day. Please feel free to submit a new question at AskJeff.net. We may not have gotten to yours today, but we eventually will continue to be a part of this. Subscribe so you don't miss out on a question every day.